We're going. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. So I have, first of all, some disappointing news. Doctrine and Covenants. Not super disappointing, but I was a little dismayed when I read it last night. So Doctrine and Covenants, and I think it's in 84. 96 through 97. It says, "For I, the Almighty, have laid my hands upon the nations to scourge them for their wickedness. And plagues shall go forth, and they shall not be taken from the earth until I have completed my work, which shall be cut short in righteousness, until all shall know me, who remain, even from the least unto the greatest, and shall be filled with the knowledge of the Lord." I'm going to be homeschooling. Erica, you're going to be homeschooling for a long time. These plagues aren't going anywhere. This coronavirus isn't going anywhere. So it's really not bad news, but I was a little like, ugh.
Amy, can you give that citation again?
Oh yeah, it was Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, and it's 96 through 98.
Thank you.
Don't be discouraged.
Well, I just have to remind myself it's almost over. Like school, we're almost over for the year and a half left, and then we're all good. But we've had a couple of rough days right now, you know, like it's just rough trying to get. I don't know how I did this more frequently before. Like I have no idea how I was able to do this.
Well,
Some days.
Amy, if you Elder Holland in last conference, he promised us this: when we've conquered this COVID-19, and we will, we all need to believe what we desire in righteousness can someday, some way, somehow yet be ours. So he has told us recently, we will.
Okay, I will believe in that.
The temples need to be open again, and that's not going to be, you know, we know that the work's not done, so we just have to have faith and move forward, and we don't know the timing, but it will all be fine.
That's true. Yeah, I know. Yeah, and things will come, like, and things will pass, you know. But reading this chapter last night, I'm like, oh, it's gonna get rough, guys. But we can do it.
Discouraged, Amy. Hang in there.
Oh, thanks. Come homeschool my kids, somebody, and then Dee, you come and do all my gardening, because I want my garden to look like yours.
Amen to that.
Like, I'll hire someone for homeschooling. Dee comes to do my yard, and then we are all good. Okay, so there is a lot on this chapter, so I only did chapter 24. So get ready for a ride, because it's going to be really fun. So first of all, before I start, any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints about any of the previous weeks? No? Okay. Now's your chance. I'm just kidding. It all relates. It all, like, there's so many things that I notice I've gone back to like with this chapter and everything too, like just, it's so interrelated throughout the scriptures. So this is chapter 24. Chapter 24, men will transgress the law and break the everlasting covenant. At the second coming, they will be burned, the earth will reel, and the sun will be ashamed. Then the Lord will reign in Zion and in Jerusalem. So this is known by a lot of scholars as Isaiah's little apocalypse, which sounds scary, but the meaning of apocalypse is revelation or unveiling. So when you think of it just as a revelation, or when you think of it just as an unveiling of truth, there's a better perspective about it. Maybe you guys agree, maybe you don't, but because this chapter, I almost think was a little bit more gloomy in some aspects than the previous ones where we were talking about the burdens, just because he was then talking about the whole world instead of these nations. But it's a beautiful, it really is a beautiful chapter when you start to put things together. wanted to go into that. I'm not going to go into that. Okay. So chapter 24, let's start in verse 1. And we're going to see within the first 3 sections, we're going to see, or excuse me, within the first 3 verses, we're going to see a chiasm. So this parallel is used to make a point. So verse 1, behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. So the first part of the chiasm is Lord. This is going to begin with the Lord, and it ends with the Lord. Okay. The second part of the chiasm, or B, would be the earth made bare and the disaster that's going to happen. I have some cross references just for this first verse, but let's read the other 2 verses before I go into those. So verse 2, so verse 2, and it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the taker of usury, so with the giver of usury to him. Verse 3, the land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled, for the Lord hath spoken his word. When we look at some of these pieces, we're going to see that we already talked about this earth being made empty back in Isaiah chapter 13. So this is the first burden that he gave to Babylon. Oops, let me put that in right. Okay, so with Babylon, or when we go back to 13, we see that, so I said verses 9 through 13, we're seeing that Babylon is so wicked, the Lord is finally like, hey, you're done. And verse 9 in Isaiah 13 says, behold, the day of the Lord cometh cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. He shall destroy the sinners out of it. So this is the purpose of the destruction, is the sinners no longer get to be in the land. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. We're going to also see that reflection or parallel in this current chapter. And then verse 12, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. So remember, he's going to leave those precious few after this destruction, okay? Back to chapter 24. I wanted to reference with when it says, behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty and maketh it waste. I wanted to reference Malachi chapter 4 and verses 5 through 6, as well as Doctrine and Covenants 3. And maybe you guys recognize what these verses refer to. But this is when Elijah is to come and to restore those important things. So this was scripture that was quoted to Joseph Smith. But in let's go to Doctrine and Covenants, because it's only 3 verses. Doctrine and Covenants, he says, behold, I will reveal unto you the priesthood by the hand of Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall plant in the hearts of the children the promises made to the fathers, and the hearts of the children shall turn to their fathers. So we all know this verse. In some way or another, we all know this verse. If it were not so, the whole earth would be utterly wasted at his coming. So we see where that waste comes in. We see where that the reason for the destruction, because if it's wasted, clean it out, make room for more. God already did this, remember? God already did all this with Noah, okay?
So Amy,
Uh-huh.
didn't Elijah leave the earth in a pillar of fire? Isn't Elijah associated with fire?
Yes, it was Elijah that was, because was it a pillar of fire or chariots of fire?
Maybe it's a chariot. Yeah. Yeah, there was
The fire for sure.
sure.
Sorry, my mouth is so dry. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
I wonder if he's going to come back with the fire. I don't know.
Will he come back again in addition to the Kirkland Temple, though?
What's that?
Well, he came to the Kirkland Temple to restore the keys. Is he going to return again? Does he need to? I mean, I'm sure he'll be part of the host in the latter days, but will it be? It won't be for keys, obviously. So yeah, I guess he could come back and he might have those.
Didn't we reference a scripture with him with all of this?
Oh,
No.
Just now? Yeah, Dr.
Yeah.
It's section 3, 1 through 3. But he did come back in the Kirkland Temple and restored the keys. He's one of those that appeared to Joseph.
Right.
So, which I know you have. Okay.
Amy, which section in the Doctrine and Covenants did you say?
3.
That's not what mine reads.
Oh, 2. Doctrine and Covenants 2.
Okay.
Thank you. It's the 3 verses in.
Yeah, it's just right there. Thank you.
No, you're good. I wrote it down wrong in like 3 places now.
Okay.
Okay, so with those 3 verses that we're starting with in chapter 24, the middle of the chiasm is verse 2. I need to stop getting those notifications. Okay, so verse 2 is all the people that are going to be affected. And we have 6 groups of people. So we have the people, the priest, servant, master, maid, mistress, buyer, seller, lender, borrower, taker, and giver of usury. In my Isaiah class, my teacher pointed out 7 groups of people, and I have counted in those 3 verses 10 times to see if I've missed one. I only see 6. What is significant about the 6 is that 6, the number, equals or is symbolic of sin, imperfection, evils of Satan, man's imperfection. It makes sense that this number would be 6 because that's what God is cleansing from the earth. We're cleansing that imperfection and that wickedness where he is from the earth to then bring in his 7th group of people, which is the righteous, the perfect, those who are being made perfect through the blood of Christ. So that, I believe, is something that is something to take note of, symbolic. I love that symbolism because I just think it's beautiful. I just think it's totally beautiful. Verse 3, again, the land shall be utterly emptied and utterly spoiled. So this is with the chiasm, ABC, this is B, number 2. And then again, it ends with the Lord. So again, this is something that happened already during Noah's time. And then that promise was made because Enoch foresaw this. And Enoch, you all know I love talking about Enoch. He made the Lord promise him that he would never flood the earth again with water. Okay? Which is really interesting because we are going to talk about a flood that is to come. But this flood is going to be a flood of righteousness or a flood of knowledge and truth. The gospel will flood the earth. So there will be another flooding. And that flooding, in my opinion, is going to be a lot more like a baptism of fire. So you can think the earth has already been baptized with water, but now it can be baptized with fire, with the truth. I wanted to also talk about the Book of Mormon. So when we go to specifically the first place we see it is actually, I think it's actually in First Nephi, but I want to go to Second Nephi. And it is in chapter 1 of Second Nephi. Oops. Oh, it's not going to space. There we go. And chapter 1, and this is going to be verses 7 and then 9 through 11. Okay, so with that, we see this is Lehi prophesying a land of liberty. And in verse 7, he knows that they're at the promised land. And he said, wherefore this land is consecrated unto whom he shall bring, whom God shall bring. And if it so be, they shall serve him according to the commandments which he hath given. It shall be a land of liberty unto them. Wherefore they shall never be brought down into captivity. If so, it shall be because of iniquity. For if iniquity shall abound, cursed shall be the land for their sakes. But unto the righteous it shall be blessed forever. Actually, I would include verse 8, and it says, and behold, it is wisdom that this land should be kept as yet from the knowledge of other nations. So it was preserved for a long time. Verse 9, wherefore I, Lehi, have obtained a promise, that inasmuch as those whom the Lord God shall bring out of the land of Jerusalem shall keep his commandments, they shall prosper upon the face of the land. And they shall be kept from all other nations, that they may possess this land unto themselves. So other than the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, when there was a little bit of help from foreign nations, to my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, to my knowledge, there has not been foreign invaders or a foreign war on this land. I mean, we have 9/11 where there was the attack from, the few people, but we have never had a war from a foreign nation on this land. Am I wrong? Other than the Revolutionary War?
Pearl Harbor was pretty bad.
That's true. I didn't think of Hawaii. Pearl Harbor. Okay. So
But that
pretty
may
much,
not count.
And then there's the French and Indian War.
Maybe that was before.
so anytime after the Revolutionary War but for the most part, we've been a protected land.
Yeah.
For the most part. Okay. Verse 10. But behold, when the time cometh that they shall dwindle in unbelief, this is the people who live on this land, after they've received so great blessings from the hand of the Lord, having a knowledge of the creation of the earth, and all men knowing the great and marvelous works of the Lord from the creation of the world, having power given to do all things by faith, having all the commandments from the beginning, and having been brought by his infinite goodness into the precious land of promise, behold, I say, if the day shall come that they will reject the Holy One of Israel, the true Messiah, their Redeemer and their God, behold, the judgments of him that is just shall rest upon them. Yea, he will bring other nations unto them, and he will give unto them power, and he will take away from them the lands of their possessions, and he will cause them to be scattered and smitten. This is a promise that we are still under here, living in the United States. This is exactly what happened to the house of Israel with their lands in Israel. And this, it's still a covenant. So the covenant people, it's a covenant promise and a covenant curse. Does that make sense? So that's something that we are in charge of keeping. And there's a lot of, disconcerting, is that the right word? Things that are happening now that we should definitely be aware of and be prepared to make a stand against as things are starting to change. Okay, so this promise on this land, it was made originally with the brother of Jared on this land specifically. Also the Nephites, reiterated by Mosiah. So I can give you all of those cross references if you want, but this is something that is not brand new news, okay? But it does affect us directly. So back to this happening at Noah's time. Genesis 6, and it's verses 12 through 13. We have a promise, or excuse me, we have God saying to Noah, he's saying how violent and how wicked the people have become. And he says, behold, I will destroy all flesh from the face of the earth. You gotta play with William, okay? So that's something, that's what's gonna happen. In one of my many books that I buy and don't read, I've read some of it. There's this one called End Time, you can't see it, End Time Prophecy by Avraham Gileadi. And he makes a quote in here that I thought was really profound, but he said, Isaiah and Jesus both predict that Noah's day foreshadowed the end of the world. This was said in Isaiah as well. This is Isaiah 54, 9 through 10. And then it was also said in Matthew by the Lord in chapter 24, 37 through 39. And I don't know if you guys want to read one of those. If we read one, let's go to Matthew.
Did you write down Matthew?
Okay, Matthew 24, 37 through 39 says, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, 1 second. Jackson, you're too loud, dude, too loud. Thank you. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about any of that so far? I feel like I'm kind of going slow, but I know that some people benefit from going slow. My voice kind of benefits because I get a little too excited and then I lose my voice. Son of Man. Do you want to talk about that title for a second? Is everyone clear on that title? Why Jesus is called the Son of Man? See if I can find it really quick. Maybe I can't find it really quick. Okay.
That was in the Book of Mormon somewhere.
Well, and it was because his mother was Mary, who was Mormon, right?
Actually, it's not. That could be it, but I can't find it. I
just read it the other day. I can't remember where it was.
I thought it was in Moses, but yeah, it might be in the Book of Mormon. So anyway, God the Father is the man of righteousness. So Jesus Christ is the Son of Man. Does that make sense? Son of the man. God is the man. Okay? So just for those who didn't know, because I remember not knowing and being like, why? Like, isn't that kind of like a derogatory term if we're already always talking about like the natural man? But no, it's really significant title, actually. So let's go on. Okay, chapter 24, back in Isaiah. Okay, verse 4. The earth mourneth and fadeth away. The world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. So this is a great, remember, it's a great and terrible day. So it's great for the righteous. It is terrible for the wicked. Okay, can get back to my references over here. Okay, I think it's interesting when it says the earth mourneth. So if we, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, but if we go back to Moses in its chapter 7, and it's verses 48 through 62, but I'm only going to read 48. It's significant that we see Enoch's having this face-to-face conversation with Jesus Christ, and he is being told to preach. He is preaching. He's doing all of those things that the Lord wants him to. So he's gathering these people from the 7 nations of the earth, and he's saying, we're building this city. This city is going to last forever, and it's going to be protected forever, right? And Christ opens in the first drawer over there under the syrup. Christ shows him the things that are going to happen. He shows him how wicked the people are at that time. And in verse 48, it says, and it came to pass that Enoch looked upon the earth, and he's seeing this wickedness. And he heard a voice from the bowels of the earth saying, woe, woe is me, the mother of men. I am pained. I am weary because of the wickedness of my children. When shall I rest and be cleansed from the filthiness which is gone forth out of me? When will my Creator sanctify me, that I may rest and righteousness for a season abide upon my face? When 49, and when Enoch heard the earth mourn, he wept and cried unto the Lord, saying, O Lord, wilt thou not have compassion upon the earth? Wilt thou not bless the children of Noah? So one more over, Jack. One more over. And then go start a show for him in my room, okay? Go start a show for him in my bedroom after he's eaten that. So we're seeing that the earth has mourned. I know we talk about in Revelations, and we see throughout the scriptures that there's even the Doctrine and Covenants, there's trumpets that are like sounding, and then, earthquakes and these tsunamis and all these, storms. And what if it is the earth mourning, and it's like her permission to finally like try to shake off this wickedness, because she does want to be cleansed, right? So she is a being almost, right? She is essentially like our mother, I guess you could say, in a way. So I think that's an interesting conversation that Isaiah hears, and then that Enoch hears, and then Enoch begs the Lord over the next several verses, and he said, and he's being open this vision of the earth, and he keeps saying, Lord, when can the earth rest? When will the earth rest? Which I think is really interesting. So let's go to verse 5 back in Isaiah, and it says, did I cover everything I wanted to right there? Yeah. And it says, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. There's so much in this verse that I think is something that we all need to pay attention to. First of all, we have the everlasting covenant. Let's talk about that. So the everlasting covenant, if you read in Doctrine and Covenants, section 66, and this is verse 2, we are told by, I think it's Jehovah or Jesus Christ, to Joseph Smith, that what the everlasting covenant is. It says, verily I say unto you, blessed are you for receiving mine everlasting covenant, even the fullness of my gospel. The everlasting covenant is the fullness of the gospel. I think sometimes we think it's way more complicated than that. There are ordinances, obviously, within that, and covenants within that we make, but the fullness of the gospel is that everlasting covenant. Sent forth unto the children of men, that they might have life, and be made partakers of the glories which are to be revealed in the last days, as it was written by the prophets and apostles in the days of old. The plan of salvation, the covenants that we make that takes us from birth and then receiving a name, through the sealing covenant, and then eventually having our calling and election made sure, That is the new and everlasting covenant. That is the covenant that was promised originally and revealed to Adam in the very first of days, right? And then it was renewed with Enoch. It was renewed with Noah, and then it was renewed with Melchizedek and Abraham. Once the 12 tribes came into Egypt and they couldn't stay worthy, Moses tried to reinstate this everlasting covenant in its fullness, but they couldn't do it. That's why they were then given the Davidic covenant. Okay, so it's a lesser covenant where only one person plays the role of Christ rather than the multitude of people. Okay, all right. So those three things: transgressing the laws, changing the ordinance, and breaking the everlasting covenant. Those three things establish complete apostasy. Okay, that's when we know that the Lord is ready to take care of the world, get rid of the wicked, cleanse the earth, get rid of the sixth, so he can bring up the seventh group of people. We've seen this happen because we know that plain and precious truths were lost during translations of the Bible from the Jews. That's not news to us, but it is a piece of it. We also have seen, when you think about the individual ordinances, we've seen the law of marriage on our covenant land change. Remember, gay marriage was legalized in October of 2014. I don't think that made God very happy. I don't know if that, I think that was just a major step of us making the world or our nation that much closer to being ripe for destruction. So that's something I think that was a big wake-up call, I hope, for the saints, right? And again, it's like we had the family proclamation that had already established where we stood as a people. I think this is interesting too. So Ludlow, on page 242 of his book, he says, each gospel principle, commandment, and ordinance was designated by God to help his children grow spiritually. Joseph Smith said, if there is no change of ordinances, there is no change of priesthood. Wherever the ordinances of the gospel are administered, there is the priesthood. And that was from the Old Testament manual on page 162. Hold on one sec. Mama. Here, here's your water. Mama. Piece of bread. Take all of that. Okay, here's your water. Okay. My babysitter's kind of falling behind today, huh?
So, I mean, what do you think about the changing of our temple ordinances? Every time, there's been a couple changes or a few changes in my lifetime, and every time there was, I thought about this sort of thing where it says you've changed the ordinances, and just looking at the history of the temple in our lifetime. I mean, they used to have really interesting things like penalties. I don't know if any of you looked into that in that ceremony, and it used to be a lot longer. And Joseph Smith I'll just mute now because we're crying here.
So I've thought about that too. My first thought has always been that it's kind of like there's a lot of things that we don't talk about in the church anymore because otherwise it would offend too many people to become a worldwide church. And until everybody is ready with that line upon line, precept upon precept, they can't hear those harder things. But there is a preparatory phase for them, I think. Do you know what I mean? So like, I don't know if that makes sense. One instance with the temple though is when I was getting prepared to receive my endowments. Jason and I were doing it together because he didn't serve a mission. He hadn't been endowed yet. And my sister, who had only gone to the temple the one time for her endowments and marriage, she decided she needed to have a heart-to-heart with me about what was about to happen with the initiatories. And since she had been, they had changed some of the physical aspects of the anointing of the initiatories. And so she tried to explain it to me. I didn't have a very good understanding of it. Scared me to death. Scared me to death. And I went, it was the next morning that I was receiving my endowments. And I remember I was sitting in the temple and Jason's just across the way from me, right? And you know how they give you the opportunities to like back out if you don't want to make these covenants, right? I think it's 3 times they offer that. I almost stood up and ran out that door every single time they offered it. And Jason knew it. He knew, like, he could feel that I was just like, oh. So I finally convinced myself to still like, okay, stay, be patient, learn about it. And then it wasn't nearly as scary as it was. I still was a little bit in panic mode, you know, after like, what did I do? Was this the right thing? And then by a week later, I was like, oh, this is all good. Like, and I started understanding the significance, and I understand a lot more now than I ever did.
Amy,
Uh-huh.
I think that we need to know too that those are not major changes. I've been through those
Exactly.
other phases, and they're just little things, and they're still implied in the endowment. They're still implied in the initiatory. They're just done a different way, so that I think part of it is so that we can do more temple work, because people who used to go to the temple, it took half a day.
All day, and we're not getting the world taken care of.
Well, I think there's a difference too.
Learn more.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a difference too, because the changes that you're talking about came from the prophet,
Yes.
came from through the church.
Exactly.
I think that the ones that they're talking about, the changing of the covenants, means an earthly change to them, making them different than the holiness and making them acceptable to the world
Yes.
instead of the righteous covenant people. And I think that's where the difference comes from.
Thank you, Connie.
This
Yes.
is what they're talking about as a worldly change of the covenants, degrading them and making them not the sacred thing that the Heavenly Father has made them.
Thank you.
Well,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, even when I was on my mission 40 years ago, they got married civilly before they got married in the temple, because it wasn't the priesthood power wasn't recognized, you know, as civil authority.
Yeah.
And they're doing that now here to kind of, because of gay marriage, partially because that is now acceptable in this country.
Yeah.
You know, so
Because if it's a marriage ordinance instead of a sealing ordinance, then it gives the people who are getting a gay marriage, it gives them a foothold to say, well, then I can get married in the temple if it's just a marriage.
exactly.
But when it becomes not a ritual, an ordinance that's a sealing ordinance, something that's not generically marriage, then yes, they don't have a foot to stand on. Where that remains a holy place that you have to have a recommend for, and you can't enter without a recommend. So they can't fight for that. Because that was one of the big concerns. I remember when I was sitting in, so the month I was sitting in the, I was in my Isaiah class, the month that happened, that change was official for the gay marriage to be recognized. And that was the major concern that was brought up of, this can give people an opportunity who are gay, who want to just pervert the temple or whatever, because it's a marriage ordinance, and they're like, no, something's going to change in the future. That's what this teacher had said, because the Lord won't allow that. And so I thought that was so significant when they said, no, it is just a sealing ordinance inside the temple.
Amy,
Uh-huh.
you know, what was said here is really important in it, that the ordinances, however they're changed, is changed through the prophet.
Yes.
So our promise is to follow the prophet. I was just reading Alma when he went in to teach the Zoramites. The big thing that was bad about them is that they took these ordinances and completely changed them around. And I said to myself, well, would that have made a difference? It wouldn't have if the prophet, I guess.
Exactly.
But the prophet didn't, because they broke off from the Nephites and from.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of factions now that have done that, right? So we have some idea of like the factions that are broken off from our church that still have their own temples, that still have their own ordinances that have changed them or have broken them essentially. We've seen even if you just talk about the ordinances that are mentioned in the Bible, and you don't even talk about the restored church, you can see how many of those things have changed. I mean, when we read the New Testament, it's suddenly like everyone's accepting this man who's doing baptism, but you don't read about it in the Old Testament, right? So the only reason we know that Adam was even baptized was because of the restored, the translated Pearl of Great Price. It's the only reason we know that Adam was baptized, and that baptism was an original ordinance that God made from the beginning. It's not something that was new with Jesus, but so many churches believe, hey, it was new with Jesus. And then what happened to that? It went from full immersion with John the Baptist and Jesus to sprinkling, and not just sprinkling of those who wanted to be converted, but then babies, and so there's so many different changes that men put into the doctrine or the theology of any religion or Christianity, that it's perverted the original restored, or the original truths that God had instituted from the beginning. Any thoughts on that or comments? Okay, and that's one reason why if we went from having the Abrahamic covenant, which has been restored now, to the Davidic covenant. So the Abrahamic covenant is something that we all are a part of. It's where each of us live our lives, excuse me, to be like Christ, to even suffer as Christ, where when it was dumbed down or simplified to be the Mosaic law, then that was when one person would take on that role of Christ. The Davidic covenant so King David was to act as the savior by proxy for the rest of the people. They didn't have to live that way. We saw that last week with King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah was the one that was trying to be like Christ, that was a messianic figure, but and he was trying to prepare the people for all these things to come, but they weren't listening to, hey, pay attention to God, repent, focus on what you need to spiritually. They didn't. They just helped with the war preparations and the building of the walls, and that was lost. So that was, again, like they could not maintain that level that is required for Zion to be built. But Enoch and his people, they did live that way. They did live according to the original Abrahamic covenant, except then it was, what do you call it? Whatever, the fullness of the gospel, right? So as according to what the Lord had originally instituted. Okay, so that's what we're talking about with that. What?
So Erica, are you bothered by it?
No, it just always made me wonder. Just made me wonder.
When my mother got married in the temple or sealed, she said a giant sword would drop down. I'm glad they don't have that anymore.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. Very interesting. The
Yeah.
change.
Babysitter for Will. Get off the tablet. Come on. I got a baby asking me.
Patty, you tell everybody how old your mom is.
Oh, my mom is 94. 95?
Wow.
95.
94.
94. So it has been a long time.
Wow.
Sorry, that's. Today is a day, man. Okay. All right, so let's go to verse 6. Isaiah chapter 24, verse 6. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. So this curse, we're going back, and in a way we're referring to the curse or the covenant that was made with the Americas. It was even made with Moses and the people of Israel, that if they were righteous, they were allowed to have that land of promise and that land of inheritance. If they broke it, they lost it. Enoch was also made that promise, but they were able to maintain such perfect righteousness that Christ dwelt with them, and they were taken from the earth gradually because of how righteous they were. So that is symbolic, as well as we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So let's go to, for those of you who do have your other scriptures, Doctrine and Covenants, section 88. 95 through 96. Ella, in the other room, honey, please. All right, so that is going to be, 88, 95 through 96. Okay, and there shall be silence in heaven for the space of half an hour. For those of you who remember the book of Revelations from last year, Revelations chapter 8, verse 1 talks about the last trumpet. Is it the last trumpet or the first trumpet? I don't remember. And then after this trumpet blows is the silence in heaven for the 30 minutes. And immediately after shall the curtain of heaven be unfolded, as a scroll is unfolded after it is rolled up. And the face of the Lord shall be unveiled. And the saints that are upon the earth who are alive shall be quickened and caught up to meet him. Okay, this is important because let's read 7 through 12 really quick in Isaiah. The new wine mourneth, the vine languisheth, all the merry-hearted do sigh. The mirth of Tabrets ceaseth, the noise of them that rejoice endeth. The joy of the harp ceaseth. They shall not drink wine with a song. Strong drink shall be bitter to them that drink it. The city of confusion is broken down. Every house is shut up that no man may come in. There is a crying for wine in the streets. All joy is darkened. The mirth of the land is gone. In the city is left desolation, and the gate is smitten with destruction. So when we start seeing this complete destruction, the first question that some of us might ask, or a question that might occur to us is, wait, where are the righteous? Where are the righteous people in this? If the land is being emptied, uh-oh. So that's when we go to this verse, and it says, and the saints that are upon the earth who are alive shall be quickened and caught up to meet him. Well, where are they going to be caught up to? Physically, in their bodies, they will be caught up to meet the people of Zion, the people of Enoch. The Lord's going to spare them. Let's read more about that. So in verse 13 of Isaiah, when thus it shall be in the midst of the land among the people, there shall be as shaking of an olive tree, and as the gleaning grapes when the vintage is done. We talked about this back again in Isaiah 13. This is verses 9 and 12 from verse 13. We also read about it in Isaiah 17, verse 6. Want me to write those down again? So 13, 9, and 12. And then also in Isaiah 17, verse 6. And then it's also in Doctrine and Covenants, 45. And it is 68 through 69. Okay. And then we're going to also go back to Moses chapter 7, and it's going to be 9 through 10. Oh, and 17, and 19 through 21. Okay, so we're going to see, especially with Moses, the Lord gives us patterns, right? So we have these patterns that we're following in history. Let's just go straight to the Doctrine and Covenants section 45. And then we'll go to Moses 7. Okay, so in Doctrine and Covenants 45, we have, it says, and it shall come to pass among the wicked that every man that will not take his sword against his neighbor must needs flee unto Zion for safety. And there shall be gathered unto it out of every nation under heaven, and it shall be the only people that shall not be at war one with another. Okay. You might want to keep your finger there. Go over to, it's Moses 7, to right now, it might be my favorite chapter for a minute. Okay. And we're going to see, especially throughout this chapter, we're going to see these parallels. So Moses 7, 9 through 10, and it came to pass that the Lord said unto me, this is to Enoch, look, and I looked, and I beheld the land of Sharon, and the land of Enoch, and the land of Omner, and the land of Hanai, and the land of Shem, and the land of Haner, and the land of Hananiah, and all the inhabitants thereof. And the Lord said unto me, go to this people, and say unto them, repent, lest I come out and smite them with a curse, and they die. And he gave unto me a commandment that I should baptize in the name of the Father, and of the Son, which is full of grace and truth, and of the Holy Ghost, which beareth record of the Father and of the Son. So that's something we can see that we're doing today. We are throughout all 7 continents preaching the gospel, and these are 7 nations that he lists. But what's interesting is that he's actually told in verse 7 and verse 8 to not go to the land of Canaan, which we know today now is in the area of Israel. Okay, so that's something that's interesting. Granted, we're not preaching as missionaries into every nation, country, or culture necessarily, but we are on all 7 continents. So that's something I think that's interesting. And then we have verse 17. And this is after things started getting bad, right? There's a lot of bloodshed, there's a lot of war, but the righteous are going with Enoch, and they're gathering to a land. 17, Moses 7. The fear of the Lord was upon all nations. So great was the glory of the Lord, which was upon his people. And the Lord blessed the land, and they were blessed upon the mountains and upon the high places, and did flourish. Okay, so they're in the mountains, which is also symbolic of temples, but I chose this background for a reason here, because I'm like, look at that. He's going to bless the people in the mountains. Oh, did it start? It didn't. Yeah, there it is. See? So he's like blessing the people in the mountains. Why not? It could be the people in Peru. It's really cool. I don't know how old it is. But so that's something I think is really neat. That's what I kind of think of when I think of these people gathering in the high places, is that area. So I think it's beautiful. We'll just go there. Okay. And then verse 18, and the Lord called his people Zion, because they were of one heart and of one mind, and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. Remember last week we talked about the ships of Tarshish and Tyre, and how the merchandise will start going around the world, but it will be merchandise for to be holiness to the Lord. So the law of consecration, right? So we see that here with Enoch's people, and that's something we covenant to do. 19, and Enoch continued his preaching in righteousness and unto the people of God, and it came to pass in his days that he built a city that was called the city of holiness, even Zion. And then verse 21, and he beheld, and it came to pass that the Lord showed unto Enoch all the inhabitants of the earth, and he beheld, and lo, Zion in the process of time was taken up into heaven, and the Lord said unto Enoch, behold, mine abode forever. So I don't know if the people are necessarily going to be taken to the city of Enoch, but they will be protected. They will be preserved during this destruction and during these latter days. If we cross-reference also to Isaiah chapter 18, and again, we just read this a couple weeks ago, and it's verse 5. Isaiah talks about the pruning that is done to give more strength and light to the more productive branches. Remember this, where it was they called it the second harvest of the season, because it was after the first harvest, I guess, is what they called with the fruit. And then the second one was, okay, this is another chance for us to strengthen the weak, which, I mean, think about that, right? So we have the restoration of the gospel, and start gathering the people. And then there's going to be another finer pruning where it's going to give more strength to any of the fruit that's to come for the final harvest. But the most righteous will already be gathered and taken to a safe place to be gathered or to be taken up. Okay. Any thoughts, questions? I know that was a long time on that because I love Enoch. Any thoughts? I'll fix my shade here. Blinds me when that's down. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to verse 14.
Is that the 144,000?
Yeah.
So there's 3 million church members in the world. That's what, about 5%?
I think so. I don't know the statistics on that exactly, but
Well,
it's not
that's-
very many comparatively.
That's not many that are gonna survive.
Well, so let me redact that. So according to I read it with an excerpt from James E. Talmage's book, but he lays it out and he says that, so what will happen is that the 10 tribes will gather here in Zion. They'll stay here for a while and it will be a big deal. So we will know when they are here and when they are gathering, because things will have already started getting bad. They will gather here. While they're here, that's when the 12,000 from each tribe will be taken or chosen, They will be blessed, and then those 144,000 will go throughout the world, finish basically gathering those few people and take them, and they will end up in Jerusalem. Does that make sense? So the 144 will be part of that major harvesting where there might only be the few left. Does that make sense? If I read that or brought that across. And I can tell you that reference, that was in that Old Testament manual. Do you guys want that reference? It might take me a second to find it. Okay, but it's either you can probably find it in Jesus the Christ, Articles of Faith by James E. Talmage, and it's in that Old Testament manual. But I thought that was interesting. So they're going to play a bigger part than we think they will, the 144. And that's a symbolic number. That's not necessarily an exact number. And also from what I've heard, that will be men and women. That won't just be men. But I don't have all those references right in front of me. Okay, verse 14. And we're talking about the righteous people. So you can see in the footnotes, the righteous remnant. They shall lift up their voice. They shall sing for the majesty of the Lord. They shall cry aloud from the sea. This was translated also by Gileadi, which you can see across the sea. And then there's another translation that says, they raise their voices. They shout for joy. From the west, they acclaim the Lord's majesty. So if you remember the layout of the tabernacle, Ephraim is on the west. Judah is on the east. And you can see that now. We are in the west. Judah is centered still in the east. And there's where the church starts in the east, then it's in the west, and goes back to the east. Does that make sense? So that's the first becoming last, the last becoming first. Okay? We can go over that more if you want to. And that's because Ephraim was called to restore Judah back to the gospel, as well as the rest of the earth. Okay, so what are they singing? This, I think, is really fascinating. What are they singing in verse 14? Doctrine and Covenants. We have the song. We know exactly what they're going to sing. Doctrine and Covenants, 84. And it is verses 98 through 102. Again, this is just, it's symbolic, again, towards Enoch. And I've said this several times, but I truly believe that Satan did not want us to know about Enoch, because there's so many parallels about what is to happen in these latter days. There's so many things that are guides from the account of Enoch for the covenant people, and Satan didn't want us to have them. So they were part of the things that were taken out. Okay, so when we look in Doctrine and Covenants, we see, starting in 98, it says, and this is after the verse that I started with, where the plague shall go forth. But it says, until all shall know me who remain, even from the least unto the greatest, and should be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, and shall see eye to eye, and shall lift up their voice, and with the voice together sing this new song, saying, the Lord hath brought again Zion. The Lord hath redeemed his people Israel according to the election of grace, which was brought to pass by the faith and covenant of their fathers. Remember, this covenant comes from Adam, the original covenant that God made with Adam. The Lord hath redeemed his people. Satan is bound, and time is no longer. The Lord hath gathered all things in one. The Lord hath brought down Zion from above. The Lord hath brought up Zion from beneath. So we're going to meet them, right? Which that might be where the righteous are going. Maybe they're not quite there, but we're on our way to meeting the city of Enoch, like as a land. The earth hath travailed and brought forth her strength. And truth is established in her bowels, and the heavens have smiled upon her, and she is clothed with the glory of her God. For he stands in the midst of his people. Glory and honor and power and might be ascribed to our God, for he is full of mercy, justice, grace, and truth, and peace, forever and ever. Amen. So that's the song that these saints are going to be singing. They're not taunting the wicked who are destroyed. They're not being like, ha ha. They are glorifying God. They're not being like, I'm more righteous and I'm so glad I'm righteous. No, they are humble and they are praising God. Okay. 15, wherefore glorify ye the Lord in the fires, even the name of the Lord, God of Israel, in the isles of the sea. I like the way Gileadi translates this. Because of it, they will give glory to Jehovah in the nations of sunrise. So here we're seeing the west to the east pattern, okay? And in the isles of the sea to the name of Jehovah, the God of Israel. So we're seeing that west to east. Verse 16, from the uttermost part of the earth have we heard songs, even glory to the righteous. But I said, this is Isaiah, my leanness, woe unto me. This makes a little bit more sense with Gileadi's translation. Whereas I thought, I am wasting away, I am weakening. Woe is me, the traitors have been treacherous, the turncoats have deceitfully betrayed. I don't want to go too much into this, but just real quick, when you were talking about traitors and betrayal, I was listening to a lecture this week, and this is from a Christian, he's not LDS, Chuck Missler. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's pretty renowned in Bible studies. But he commented on this verse, and that the Antichrist that's going to raise in the end days will deceive several people throughout the world. He's going to make all these promises. He's going to be able to do miracles, and he's going to make things seem amazing. And then he's going to betray us all. He's going to betray everybody. And those who refuse to believe in him, he's going to try to punish. But for those who rely on him, he's going to become a traitor. And that's when their great downfall will happen. And we talked about that a lot too in Isaiah 13 with Babylon. And people are following the king of Babylon. And then he falls and people are like, oh no, where do I go? We're going to see that. But so many people are going to be fooled, and there's going to be that betrayal. Verse 17, the fear and the pit and the snare are upon thee, O inhabitants of the earth. And it shall come to pass that he who fleeth from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit. And he that cometh up out of the midst of the pit shall be taken in the snare. For the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth do shake. And we're seeing 17 through 20, we're seeing a parallel from Joel 2. And again, that was one of those verses again that Joseph Smith heard from or was given to Moroni the first time he met Moroni. Ludlow commented on page 244 of his book, he said, the wicked will futilely fail to avoid God's many judgments. Although they may escape from one, from fear, they will fall into another, the pit. And if they escape from the second, or the pit, they will be ensnared by a third judgment. So they can keep running, but the Lord has a punishment for them, and his ways cannot be frustrated. They can't. Verse 19, the earth is utterly broken down. The earth is clean dissolved. The earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage. And the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. I didn't write all of the references to this verse, but there are at least 4 other places in the scriptures that talk about the earth reeling to and forth like a drunkard, specifically those words. Let's see, I know it's in Doctrine and Covenants 49, verse 23. We also have it in section 88, verse 87. Let's see, I think that if you want more, there's definitely more. It's throughout the Old Testament as well. In Joel specifically, and I believe it was also in Malachi. Okay, verse 21. If you look at my book, verse 21, I put in verse 20 as verse 21. So let's just read Gileadi's translation. Just ignore that I screwed up the actual 21 verse. In that day, will Jehovah deal on high with the hosts on high, and on earth with the rulers on the earth of the earth. He's talking about, and this is from Ludlow's words again. He's talking about spirit beings from above the earth, but I don't necessarily think he means above the earth in that sense, like they're righteous. These are Satan and in his third host of heaven. And on earth with the rulers of the earth. When we talked in Isaiah chapter 14, we talked about this is the destruction of Babylon, and how Babylon is saying, the king of Babylon is saying, I'm amazing, and I'm like God, and I can do this, and my throne is going to be the stars of heaven that God sits on now, because I'm going to be God. And we talked about how Satan will be cast down. This king of Babylon will be cast down. And that all of the hosts in hell are waiting for him, because they want to see this guy that caused all these problems, right? And then they're like, it's him? That's it? Right? And then in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 8, and it says, and all the kings of the nations, even all of them lie in glory, everyone his own house, because these rulers of the earth, because they originally kept their first estate, they are able to be resurrected and will always, or will inherit, unless they were sons of perdition, they will inherit a glory, and Satan never will. Verse 22 in Isaiah, and they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and shall be shut up in the prison, and after many days shall they be visited. This could be referencing Doctrine and Covenants 138, and Christ, when his body was in the tomb, and he organizes the missionary forces to visit those in spirit prison, because many of them were just led falsely into wickedness, into apostasy because of their leaders. And so they still will receive a glory, they still will receive an opportunity to be forgiven. Okay, last verse, verse 23. Then the moon shall be confounded, and the sun ashamed, when the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before his ancients gloriously. This is a beautiful verse. If you think about, we've heard about the moon and the sun before, and it's the moon turned to blood, and the sun darkened, right? So this confounded and this ashamed are really like darkened or turned to blood, because the glory of Jesus Christ will be so bright that it will be as they don't exist, or as if they are dark. Because Christ's glory is going to be so magnificent when he comes to reign with his righteous. in Zion. And I love that it says, he shall reign in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before his ancients gloriously. We talked about Adam and the original covenant being with Adam. Think about Adam on the Almond. The last meeting with Adam and his posterity was at Adam on the Almond. It was Enoch, if you do the math, Enoch, I think, was 62 years old when Adam passed away, if I remember that correctly. So Enoch knew the original father of the world. But this Adam on the Almond will happen again. A couple references here will be Doctrine and Covenants 133:49, and we also have Doctrine and Covenants 116 verse 1. It's going to be a glorious day, and yes, the ancients will reign with them. I thought it was interesting. I was talking to my neighbor about, she's the one that's Muslim, and I was asking her about the people in the scriptures. I was trying to parallel our scriptures a little bit, and she was mentioning like the last part of a name, like Mike. She said Mike Ail. I think it's how she said it, but that Ail part, Raphael. All of them, that means God. And she said when they're done with this earth, then they're done and they're gone and they go do their own thing wherever that is, in heaven, and they have nothing more to do with this earth. And it kind of made me sad because I'm like, I think that people who have ownership in this earth and in their posterity would stick around. So I love that Adam is going to be a part of this, and Enoch and Noah and Elijah. Like, you know what I mean? I love that we are God's family and that they are going to be there, and that belief, because it just makes it more of a big family to me. I love that. The Lord's glory, by the way, I do have a reference for that. Making the moon and the sun seem dark comes from Moses 7, but I didn't write down the verse. I should have. So that's chapter 24. Yeah, I did it a little over an hour, so I knew that there was enough that I wouldn't be able to do 2 chapters today once I started studying. So does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, anything about this chapter, any insights that you want to share? Because there's so much when you start looking at the history of the covenants. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to say. Let's see if I can quickly find it. And I've read this to you guys before, but I think it is so absolutely essential for us to start learning the covenants. Let's see if I can find it. So Gileadi says in, I think it's the first chapter somewhere in his book, he talks about us as a people, as Latter-day Saints, and it was really impressive to me what he said, because I know that I'm not familiar enough with the scriptures. If I can't find it, I'll take it up later if I find it later. But he says, as Latter-day Saints, William, please stop, honey. As Latter-day Saints, we don't know our own roots. We don't understand the ancient covenants, which means we don't understand the covenants we're really making. We don't understand the Bible. We don't understand our roots, because the Book of Mormon is a history of people from the Jewish land who are trying to bring the fullness of the gospel to establish the covenant in a promised land once again. We have to start learning and understanding those covenants and those pieces of the gospel that will make more sense, build our testimony, and bring us closer to Christ, because that's the purpose of these covenants, is to help us understand Christ, understand God, and help us to become like God in the end. And without that knowledge, we can't do it. Without a knowledge of the scriptures, we're not going to get there. That's why we're given this handbook, right? Like this is the handbook of life. Can you even see my scriptures? And if we don't understand it, we don't get it. William, no. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so awesome, Amy, awesome. I just think doing what we can to seek the Lord in our lives and obey his laws and establish his righteousness and walk in his ways. Because we know that the earth, oops, I think my iPad is dying,
Oh.
but the earth will be wasted because, there's no longer, God in the details. And if we can put, God in the details of our life, we can take part of that Zion and not be afraid, not have to be in fear all the time.
Yeah. I love that you said that. So I write quotes that I love that people say in my scriptures. And some people, when they speak, I always listen. And one of them, I don't know if Elaine Bishop's on here, but one of them was actually from John Bishop. And I don't remember where I read it, but it was in my Doctrine and Covenants somewhere. But he said, the only way we can see beauty is if there's beauty inside of us. And I thought that was so it was impactful to me, because those who see the miracles are only those who believe in them and those who are looking for them. And we're not going to see this grandeur of God's plan and the earth and those parallels throughout the scriptures and everything, unless we're trying to see God in there, unless we believe in Jesus Christ and that sacrifice, unless we see it. So we have to put that beauty inside of us first in order to see it. So I think that's so perfect what you said. I love that.
Well, thanks, Amy. You've been amazing.
Thank you.
Your class today. This is just what I need every week. So
It's
thank
good.
you, everybody. Yeah.
Okay, Amy,
I agree.
Good. Thank you.
Amy, according to my calculations, it's time for your Zoom to be renewed. So if anyone wants to contribute.
Thank you. You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I've had some good contributions, so thank you so much for those who have. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Anyone, any other questions before we say closing prayer? Okay. Awesome. Is there anybody who would be interested to say closing prayer?
I'll be glad to.
Okay. Thank you.